Parties, faith-based groups, civil society groups met, and it was just an opening ceremony. And right after that, the mediators met with delegates from the rebels and the government.
If both parties arrive at a peace deal, what measures would be in place to ensure that it's implemented and not just on paper?
Well, any peace deal that is reached has to give room for security improvement, because as it is now, a lot of humanitarian agencies are not able to reach the people who are affected by this conflict, just because there's a lot of fighting in most of the states that are badly affected. That is Jonglei State, Upper Nile State, Unity State. These are the areas that are hard hit by this looming humanitarian crisis. And so any peace deal has to give a sort of humanitarian corridor for aid agencies to reach the people who are in a dire need of basic needs. Otherwise, if there is a peace deal and the belligerent forces are still fighting each other, and that's not going to help the humanitarian agencies.
Well, finally, John, if a peace deal is reached, how would it affect the humanitarian catastrophe, which seems almost inevitable based on information made available by the United Nations?
If there is any peace deal coming out of Addis, it has to be an inclusive peace deal, a peace deal that addresses the root causes of what really made the two parties to start fighting. And it was all about lack of democracy within the ruling SPLM party. So any deal that is coming out of Addis has to take into consideration that there is an open space for other political parties to be part and parcel of the governance system in South Sudan. Otherwise, without that, there will be no peace in the country, because what is happening is a lot of other voices have started speaking out against what they look at as lack of direction from the ruling party, lack of leadership from the leaders of the ruling party. And so anything that will bring stability in South Sudan has to do with democracy. People have to be given the opportunity to speak out their minds.
Thanks a lot. I've been speaking to the Voice of America's John Tanza, and he's the co-host of the South Sudan in Focus program. Talk about investing big. The U.S. President Barack Obama has confirmed the pledging of $50 billion of investment in Africa in areas such as energy and infrastructure. The announcement came at the first U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit attended by 51 African heads of state, and the purpose of the summit, as we understand, is to strengthen existing ties. The deals announced include a $5 billion partnership between private equity firm Blackstone and Aliko Dangote, that's Africa's richest businessman, for energy infrastructure projects in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as more investments in Mr. Obama's Power Africa initiative.
The President of the Republic of South Africa.
There were more candid discussions on day 2 of the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit as the U.S.-Africa Business Forum held, with leaders and captains of industry sharing their ideas on forging stronger partnerships with the United States. Despite the power shortage and poor infrastructure identified as challenges, they paint a picture of an Africa that is ever improving.
I think it is important for people to look at Africa and see that Africa is changing. There is a good story that is coming out of the continent of Africa in terms of working together, in terms of understanding our problems, in a point of owning up to what in the past could have been mistakes.
6 of the 10 fastest growing economies are in Africa. The period between 2011 and 2015, it is projected that 7 out of the 10 fastest growing economies will be in Africa. But why are we there? Because of strong, of course, pursuit of sound economic policies.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Please be seated.
Challenges or no, the United States seems determined to court Africa's trust. On Tuesday, the U.S. government pledged a new level of $300 million in assistance per year to expand the reach of Power Africa across the continent in pursuit of a new aggregate goal of 30,000 megawatts.
And as of today, including an additional $12 billion in new commitments being announced this week by our private sector partners and the World Bank and the government of Sweden, we've now mobilized a total of more than $26 billion to Power Africa, just since we announced it. $26 billion. So today we're raising the bar. We decided we're meeting our goal too easily, Zuma. So we got to go up. So we're tripling our goal, aiming to bring electricity to more than 60 million African homes and businesses that can spark growth for decades to come. Fourth, we'll do more to help Africans trade with each other, because the markets with the greatest potential are often the countries right next door. And it should not be harder to export your goods to your neighbor than it is to export those goods to Los Angeles or to Amsterdam.
Investing in Africa will create jobs in Charlotte, North Carolina, and expand the power supply in Ghana because of the $175 million deal signed by SEWW Energy to upgrade Accra's electricity grid, a direct result of our recent trade mission. Investing in Africa will support workers in California and strengthen the health of patients in Nigeria because of the MOU signed by Environmental Chemical Corporation to construct a state-of-the-art cancer institute in Ibadan. Thank you very much. Enjoy the day.
Well, we'll take another break now, and when we return, we look at how a Mogadishu-based NGO is working to protect women and children to curb the rising numbers of sexual violence cases in Mogadishu.
It opens with a gate of arts, moves into windows of creativity.
She finds the only English word she knows from somewhere hidden in the belly of a 4'9" body, and instead of "I won't care," she greets us with "bye-bye."
Branches into rooms of color. And ends with a roof of imagination. Walk into Art House. The pieces all come together at 9:30 p.m. every Saturday. Art House, life is art.
Welcome back to Network Africa. Now, just before we call today, let's round things up in Somalia. Now, in that country, sexual and gender-based violence is a major issue, especially for internally displaced persons living in South and Central Somalia. As a result, a Mogadishu-based NGO is working to protect women and children to curb the rising numbers of sexual violence cases in Mogadishu.
Early morning in Mogadishu, Somalia. The gates of the Hawa Taco Center have just opened. Inside, a group of women are slowly making their way into a large room for today's tailoring class. Here, they are taught basic skills in dressmaking, cutting, sewing, and sketching. All the women are rape survivors. Opened in early 2013, the Hawa Taco Center is one of the only places victims of sexual violence can go to seek help. Khadija Abdullahi says she was gang raped and beaten by a group of armed men. Somalia has one of the highest rates of gender and sexual violence against women in the world. According to United Nations statistics, about 1,700 women were raped in Somalia in the first 11 months of 2012. The UN also reports there are nearly 800 cases of sexual and gender violence in the first 6 months of 2013. Some local NGOs say the numbers could be much higher. For women like Khadija, the center is a lifeline. Along with the tailoring classes, she's also receiving counseling. Saeed Abdul Qadri is a trainer at the center. Defying gender and cultural taboos, the teachers here also give the women literacy lessons. Many cannot read or write. Somalia is slowly emerging from nearly 2 decades of war. Sexual abuse against women in the Horn of Africa nation is often perpetrated by armed groups, including government forces. Fatima Ibrahim is the coordinator of the Awataku Center. She says there is a culture of denial, silence, and stigma when it comes to rape in the country.
The one obstacle that we face is when we're dealing with the survivors they are declining the legal aid service, whereby they fear the stigmatization of the society, as well as they can't even share the problem they had with their own families.
The most vulnerable women are those living in Mogadishu's makeshift displaced camps, which host up to 200,000 people who have fled fighting and hunger. A majority of camp residents are women, mostly mothers living alone with their children. Raliu Hassan's biggest concern is she has no one to protect her or her 2 children. Unless things change, many of Somalia's women and children will continue living in fear, while victims of rape and sexual assault will remain hidden in the shadows.
And that's where we draw the curtains on this episode of Network Africa. Thanks so much for your company. As always, I'd like to hear from you, so feel free to send me an SMS via the number on your screen. Till next time, stay blessed and proudly African. I'm Cynthia Are. Bye for now.
A time comes in the life of every race when people are driven by echoes of the past to chart a course for an exalted future. Africa is at this threshold, as major actors in the Africa arena plots a renaissance towards common destiny. Let's pedal across the streams of yesterday, from the backstreets of Africa to the defining roles of policymakers, the political realities of the African nation, balance of power, and the strive to sustain national interest and identity. Join us on Network Africa on Channels Television. Network Africa, a rallying point for the imagined.